Friday on the Krug Show. We're 1 second into the show, and I'm already getting phone calls. Never a good sign, but we're off and rolling. Chase Sr. in the house. A lot of Niner things to get to. The draft is approaching. Is Myles Garrett going to get traded to the Niners? To the Eagles? Well, the right guy's in the house to discuss it. Chase Sr., he's here. Let's go. Off and roll Krug Show on a Friday, brought to you by Pig and a Pickle. The best barbecue in all of Northern California is Pig and a Pickle. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. They're soon opening in Petaluma. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Get some brisket chili. Tell them the Krug sent you. Also, thank you, Novato Chevrolet, family-owned dealership for over 50 years. Friendly staff to meet all of your expectations. Huge selection, great prices, amazing customer service. Go see my man David at Novato Chevrolet. Habbas Law covers pet adoption fees at the San Jose Animal Care Center tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Every dog, every cat, every bunny, every iguana, everything. You just come with a great attitude. They're going to do the rest. Leave with a family and a pet for life. Very, very cool. Thank you, Habbas Law. And thank you, Alomar Marina, alomarmarina.net, 5999 Garden Highway. Float while you dine. They're open Wednesday through Sunday. Try the shrimp tacos. Tell them that Krug sent you. All right, we're off and running on a Friday, and it's great to have Chase Sr. in the house. And Chase, we've missed a couple weeks now, and we should probably give Chase his proper intro, the star of Catfield Niner coverage. There's some Eagle fans here as well. He's also part of the Eagle coverage. Oh, just kind of a slightly less smattering of applause there.
I launched my own show, too, called The Chase Down. So I'm talking about the NFL and college football on a national scale now. So I'm busy.
What, he's got his own show?
Yep. There we go.
Look at that. He covers the Niners? How about the Eagles? No. Maybe just
it could be a boo too. It could be a boo.
The Eagles? Oh no, that's not good. We need a bounce. There we go. What happened when the Niners went to Philly? The Eagles got bounced out of the playoffs. All right,
just down their leg.
Yeah. What are you hearing on the Myles Garrett front? This is a really interesting story. Adam Schefter was asked about it the other day, and he said, hey, look, anytime I see teams moving bonus schedules around, it always makes me think that that's to facilitate a trade. Well, the Niners have done that with Trent Williams, and now the the Browns have done that with Myles Garrett, moving his late March bonus payment schedule from $29 million in late March to now 1 week before week 1. So I think it's like August 30th. And immediately the thought from Schefter was maybe they're going to try to trade Myles Garrett. He called the Browns. They said, we are absolutely not going to trade Myles Garrett. But I kind of feel like Myles Garrett's the kind of player at this point that you're not going to trade him until he's traded. You know what I mean? He's not going to be traded for several reasons until he's traded. What's your read on that? Because there's a lot of talk that Howie Roseman and the Eagles would like to be involved. There's some rumors that the Rams and Seahawks could be kicking tires, and there's a lot of speculation now about the 49ers as well. What do you know?
I would also look at the Chicago Bears and the Dallas Cowboys. Those were two teams who are very interested in Max Crosby. And I know that the Browns told Adam Schefter, we're adamant. We are not trading Myles Garrett. Of course, that's what they're going to say to Adam Schefter because they know that he can amplify something to his audience. Do you think the Browns are going to tell Shefty, yeah, we're trading Myles Garrett. We're putting the for sale sign out in front of Garrett's house, and we are welcoming all trade calls? Of course not. That would limit and hurt their leverage and hurt the asking price. Anytime a team redoes a contract like this, especially one where it makes trading him after June 1 a lot more feasible, I think a lot of people's ears across the NFL really perk up. And of note, Andrew Berry, the Browns general manager, used to work under Howie Roseman. He manipulates the cap like Howie does. This is a very Howie Roseman type of approach to opening up the Browns options until the start of the season to give it 5 months to field offers from other teams across the NFL to see what they're willing to give up for Myles Garrett. And for Cleveland, is Myles Garrett's value ever going to be higher? I don't think so. He's 30 years old right now. He's at the peak of his powers. He's coming off arguably the best season in the history of the National Football League. He had 23 sacks and 89 pressures last year with nearly 40 quarterback hits. And it's very rare that a player like this could become available. 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 5-time first-team All-Pro, 2-time second-team All-Pro, and a 7-time Pro Bowler. He's already 20th, Larry, all-time in sacks with 125.5. And physically, he is one of the more gifted athletes that I've ever seen as far as body type and build and longevity. I put him right up there with LeBron James. The fact that LeBron came into the league in 2003 and still looks and plays the way that he does is incredible. How Myles Garrett looks, he's a Greek god. He's an Adonis, right? And so I think the Browns changed the language in his contract to open up the door for a potential Myles Garrett trade. It doesn't mean that he's going to get dealt, but everybody thought that there was no way Max Crosby was going to get traded, and then the fraudulent Ravens backed out of that trade. So if you're the Browns, do you want to rebuild with a 30-year-old pass rusher who is making $40 million per season? Or if you're Cleveland and you want to go about this rebuilding process in a way where you want to draft and develop and build through the draft, what if you get 3 first-round picks for Myles Garrett? Those players are then cost-controlled assets and very affordable throughout the duration of their rookie contracts. The quarterback class this year in the draft is very thin. The quarterback class in 2027 is extremely deep. Jim Haslam, the Browns owner, went to Tennessee. He's very close with the Manning family. Arch Manning is going to be draft eligible after this year. And so the Browns could stockpile a bunch of draft capital and then this time next year be intent that they want to get their franchise quarterback. For the Niners, I think San Francisco is tied in here because of how they've operated, how they have built their teams, but the players who they've been interested in before. They've made calls about Max Crosby. They've made calls and they've been interested in Trey Hendrickson. They've gauged the value of both of those players. And under John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, they've gone hard after defensive ends and pass rushers. They've been willing to invest in that position. I wish they'd invest more along the offensive line, but to their credit, defensive trenches also very important. And they've made some big moves there, trades there, and signings there. So if I'm the Niners, I'm calling up Cleveland to see what it takes. And lastly, Larry, before I throw it back to you, Niners offseason, I've really liked it. I think they've gone after players who are really talented, who fit their scheme, who fit their culture, but they've been financially savvy. Like Mike Evans on a 1-year contract, $16 million in guaranteed money. If he stays healthy, that could be a huge hit. Christian Kirk is on a 1-year contract. He's going to be 30 years old. Evans is going to be 33. You trade for Osa Odighizuwa. Those are all win-now moves. So the Niners clearly think that they can win right now. Myles Garrett is the ultimate win-now player.
No doubt. No doubt. I think this makes sense on a lot of fronts. When I first heard it, I'm like, I don't know. But, think about it. 49ers want to look at every difference maker front seven guy there is. Some guys they can't get because they can't afford them. Trey Hendrickson, let's say. Some guys they can't get because they don't want because the body type and the breaking down, probably Max Crosby. Some guys you don't want because they're just bad guys.
Yeah.
Micah Parsons, so you take away the guys whose bodies are broken or you can't get, or they're at the wrong point in their career, or they're criminals, or they're just bad actors off the field. And that just eliminates so many different options. Well, Myles Garrett checks all those boxes. He's gettable. He's in his prime. He's not a bad guy. He fits your scheme. So I think he really checks a lot of boxes. Then for the Browns, I called my Browns people, after, I'm doing this as long as I have, I've got a lot of gray hair, and also I got somebody that I feel like I know who really is pretty dialed in on almost every team in the league. So I called a couple of my Browns people. And I said, dude, what is going on with the Browns? And they said that the unknown, the great unknown, is that Myles Garrett was a big advocate for Jim Schwartz to become the head coach, and that it went to Todd Monken and they got bypassed Schwartz. And then there was some debate for a few weeks. Is Schwartz going to stick around? And then Schwartz resigned. And my guy said that Myles Garrett was a big advocate for Schwartz being the head coach, and that he may have told
player of the year twice under Schwartz, by the way.
Yeah, and he may have told the Browns, get me the hell out of here. And I won't say it publicly so you don't lose value, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if he wanted out, and that it's known within NFL circles, but it's not necessarily known among NFL fans. So that also means that the 3 number 1 price tag could be quite a bit less. I was also told that the Browns' focus has gone from the defense of line and the defense overall to redoing the offensive line. And they really believe that if they have a dominant offensive line with Judkins and Sampson and Sanders, that they could just have a run-heavy scheme and help Sanders develop this year. And they think that he might be their guy. But they said the other thing I heard was that they really want to get assets for that 27 draft, because they want to be able to, supposedly there could be as many as 8 quarterbacks going in round 1. Arch Manning, Dante Moore, Trinidad Chambliss, Jaden Mayava, CJ Carr, Julian Sayin, Brandon Sorsby, Lenora Sellers.
Yeah.
All of those guys could be going in the first round. From what I heard from my Cleveland source was that the Browns want lots of 2027 draft capital so that they can maneuver any way they want for the quarterback that they want if Shador's not the guy, and that they want to have a dominant offensive line this year. They want to run the heck out of it and see if they can make Shador be the guy so they can invest in a different non-quarterback position in next year's draft. So I do think 27 draft capital is going to be on the list. Then I think from the Niner perspective, why would the Niners be involved? Well, for lots of reasons. One, they've got a very young defense, 3rd youngest defense in football. Are you going to add more young players to Alfred Collins and CJ West? And if you do add more 22, 23-year-old players, does it take you a couple years? I think there's also a lot of fear that Myles Garrett could wind up in Philly, Seattle, the Rams. In that situation, Dallas, Chicago. I mean, these are all really scary situations for the 49ers. And then I also think that the 49ers are looking at the first round pick this year. And I think they're looking at they want to get a defensive end. And Cassius Howe's got short arms. Zion Young's got some off-field issues. Caleb Banks is really exciting as a tackle, but he's got a broken foot. R. Mason Thomas has got a little bit of short arms. Malachi Lawrence, you got to question the level of competition at Central Florida. Gabe Yakis, who knows? I mean, none of those guys have the kind of, production or curve that Myles Garrett gives you. So, the other thing is the 49ers also moved Trent Williams' schedule around, and there's a lot of talk that now people believe the Niners are going to get a deal done with Trent Williams. But once again, when Schefter first heard the report that Myles Garrett's bonus schedule was being, kicked down the road, he was like, it reeks of a trade. Well, doesn't that also reek of a trade for Trent Williams? And would the Niners be able to keep some of the draft capital by trading maybe Trent Williams or Mikael Williams or Ricky Pearsall in a deal for Myles Garrett, in addition to whatever draft capital? So I think there's a deal to be had there. I think it makes sense for the Browns if they're looking at their quarterback in the 27 draft. I think it makes sense for the Niners if you're trying to block him from going to Philly, LA, or Seattle. And I think it makes sense for the Niners timeline. My first thought was, no, I don't like that. It shortens their window. But, I kind of feel like John Lynch is at his Les Snead moment. Les Snead drafted Michael Brockers, Tavon Austin, Alec Ogletree, Greg Robinson. Then he drafted Aaron Donald. But I mean, basically from 2017 through 2023, Les Snead traded 7 straight number 1 picks, and he got guys like Stafford, OBJ, Jalen Ramsey. They won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like the Niners are in that. They've tried it a bunch of different ways in the draft. They haven't been able to get the kind of momentum or consistency there. And I think they're looking for a shortcut. I think Garrett's probably it.
And I think John Lynch is at a pivotal point of his general manager career here. You know, the Niners got to the Super Bowl in 2019, got to the Super Bowl in 2023. They've made it to NFC Championship games in 2019, 2021, 2022, and 2023. In 2025, after a 6-11 season in 2024, which was highly disappointing and maddening, the 49ers won 12 games in a little bit of a reset year. But he's seen Les Snead win a Super Bowl in 2021. He's seen John Schneider win his second Super Bowl with a second coach and quarterback. And this Niners team has gotten close, but they haven't been able to get over the hump. And you can't tell me that the 49ers go out there and trade for Osa Odighizuwa, sign Mike Evans, sign Christian Kirk, and they don't think that they can compete for a Super Bowl this year. I think they see that the door is ajar for them to compete for a championship, which is why they're making all of those win now moves. And in 2025 in the draft, first 5 selections all went to defense. That was smart after you let a bunch of players go who got paid in free agency. Funny enough, one of those players you let go, Dre Greenlaw, is back with this team. Another win now move, right? And so you've been able to reset the defense a little bit financially while still paying big-time dollars to Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, now Osa Odighizuwa. But you've got a bargain player in Diamador Lenore. You've got another cheap corner in Renardo Green. You're really cheap in the safety room. Your defense right now is young, but you're not paying a lot of big-time dollars to a lot of those players. And on offense, Trent Williams will come off the book soon. Christian McCaffrey probably going to come off the book soon. George Kittle signed that extension. Hopefully he can come back healthy. But I actually think that's a pretty affordable deal for George Kittle if he can play up to his caliber. You're paying Brock Purdy, but outside of that, you're not paying a lot of guys long-term money on the offensive side of the ball. So from a cap standpoint, the Niners are set up pretty nicely. They've got some draft picks that they have in the chamber at their disposal. A Myles Garrett trade would make a lot of sense for San Francisco for all of those reasons. And does a move like that help you close the gap on the Rams? I think it does. Does a move like that help you close the gap on Seattle when they've lost a bunch of players so far this offseason? And Larry, they have 4 draft picks here in 2026. I think it does. And you also could keep Myles Garrett from going to an Eagles, going to a Bears, going to a Cowboys. So again, if I'm John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, this is the apple of my eye. I mean, can you imagine what Garrett, Bosa, Odighizuwa, Michael Williams can do with your front? We're talking about one of the best players in the history of football here, who is a game changer, a needle mover. And you mentioned earlier Jim Schwartz. What does Jim Schwartz run with his system? 4-3 wide 9. What do the Niners run? 4-3 wide 9. And John Lynch said at the combine to us, they're going to continue to run that same system, which is another reason why I like the hiring of Raheem Morris, because he's been malleable and he's been able to cater his system to the talent. He came up in the Tampa 2 when he took over for Brandon Staley. Vic Fangio disciple, he was running a 3-4. Now he's going to get back to running the 4-3. So Myles Garrett would be a splash move for the Niners, and it's a move that I think would inject a lot of excitement into this fan base, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, no question. And you're right. Lynch doesn't have forever. It's go time. They don't have 3 years to wait. I mean, it's not that they don't have 3 years of contract going or 3 years of Jed's confidence, but 3 years from now, CMC, Kittle, Trent, these guys are all gone in 3 years. So they got to make it happen right now. They got to re-pry open that window, and they got to make it happen right now. Now, John Lynch showed up in Athens, Georgia last week for the Georgia Pro Day. He skipped the Stanford Pro Day for the Georgia Pro Day. Good move. And there was a lot of speculation. Who was John there to see? You know, and the one thing about John, you know, you covered the Niners and the Eagles. Both John and Howie are very tight with Kirby Smart. The Eagles love the Georgia players. They draft them religiously. Kirby the Niners' number one pick last year was a Georgia defensive lineman, and Kirby, Lynch and Kirby are tight, so I'm not sure who Lynch was there to see. Was it Monroe Freeling, who might fall to them? Was it Kristen Miller, who's good buddies with Mikael Williams? And let's be honest, Kristen Miller is the pick that the Niners would normally make, right? I mean, he's 6'4", 320 pounds. He's healthy. He's not a bad guy. He's a good guy. So there's no character concerns. He played at Georgia. He plays the game on his feet. He's a great athlete. I just think that if I could see the Niners taking Kristen Miller, I absolutely could. But the other guy is CJ Allen. And, there's a belief that if you have a great, player and you want a great player behind that guy, that's the best way to develop your roster. It's like you have Dre, you have Fred, go draft CJ Allen, who's supposedly an awesome guy and major productive guy, and slot him behind those guys, and maybe you'll have an all-pro leader to your defense. Some people don't like CJ Allen, think he's a little stiff. I kind of like him. Who do you think, if since Lynch was at the Georgia Pro Day, some people think it was Oscar Delp, who ran 4.46, but he's never had over 300 yards receiving, so it's a little bit of a projection on traits. If you were guessing, which Georgia player was Lynch in Athens to see?
Well, I'll tell you what, he skipped out on the Stanford Pro Day. One player who I like from Stanford is Sam Roush. He's a huge tight end who's a really good blocker, athletic pass catcher, tested really well at the NFL Combine. But that Stanford program isn't great. So why waste your time going to that Pro Day when you can go to a Georgia Pro Day where you can get a look at some of these prospects who there are multiple of them who I think could be impact players in the 2026 NFL draft. So I don't think Monroe Freeling falls to the Niners at number 27. I think he goes inside the top 15. A little bit inexperienced at left tackle, but the highs were high. Lows were a little bit low while at Georgia, but the athletic qualities and traits are certainly there. Offensive tackle is a very traits-based type of position, and I think he's an NFL-ready prospect. I'd look at Cleveland for an opportunity for him. You were talking about the Browns earlier, how they really want to rebuild that offensive line. They've gone about that this offseason, but they also got rid of every single starter from that offensive line from a year ago. So I would like Monroe Freeling as a future Trent Williams replacement. I just don't think he's going to go and drop all the way to the Niners at number 27. CJ Allen, a really good linebacker, 6'1", 235, standout inside player, known for leadership, instincts, blitzing ability. He's definitely versatile. I don't think he's a Fred Warner coverage type of linebacker, but I think he's good there. And I think maybe a little bit better than Fred. You can use him at like edge from time to time to get after the quarterback, but I don't think the Niners go that direction in the first round. Christian Miller is a player who I thought the Niners would maybe look at prior to the trade of Osa Digizua. But if you already have Alfred Collins, CJ West, and Osa Digizua, yes, you could theoretically add a fourth defensive tackle to that room because that's a very rotational position. He's very tight with Mikael Williams, and they're best friends. But you drafted Alfred in the second round. You drafted CJ in the fourth round. You traded a third for Osa. You might be a little bit too deep at that position while being thin at other positions. An explosive playmaker who I like day 2, maybe day 3 if he falls, is Zachariah Branch. I mean, he's everything that everybody wanted Jacob Cowing to become, but he's even better than Jacob Cowing. I had an opportunity to catch up a little bit with Branch, and he's a really good kid. He was so explosive at USC, and he was explosive at times at Georgia, but didn't get as many touches as I thought he was going to when he transferred there because Georgia was spreading the ball around. Oscar Delp is a really good tight end prospect who's a really good blocker. Dylan Bell is a really physical wide receiver. So there are a lot of players from that Georgia program who could make sense for the Niners.
Yeah, no question. I'm going to play you this one cut. This is a cut of Kirby talking about CJ Allen, and listen to what he says about CJ Allen here.
Everybody likes to talk about their guys. I'm going to brag on mine. So CJ Allen is a rising junior and one of the best leaders we've had in our program at linebacker. He is from Barnesville, Georgia, right down the road, and is a tremendous leader. Quick story about CJ. my son needed to get treatment for the last couple months, and he would come in the office every morning around 6:50, 6:55 to get treatment at 7 so he could make it to school by 8. And there wasn't a morning that we got there that CJ Allen was not already in the training room doing some kind of rehab, running, getting warmed up, taking care of injuries. He's just a relentless worker and a relentless competitor who got to play in some big games as a freshman. Probably even before he was ready. And that's paid off for us last year and this year with CJ. I know everybody likes to talk.
So, I mean, to me, that
Guy
sounds,
loves ball.
yeah, I mean, that sounds very Patrick Willis-like, That's what Patrick Willis was. He was this awesome athlete. There was a little stiffness to Patrick, but he was still a great athlete, and so CJ Allen. CJ Allen's a 3-year starter. He's considered to be a high-character player, and you just heard Kirby describe him as a relentless worker, and that Kirby shares all these anecdotes and stories with Lynch. What do you think of linebacker, and what do you think of them taking a player like this and putting him in a room with Dre and Fred and just trying to put a great player behind 2 other great veteran players?
I do think there's a chance that he falls to 27. I think he could be on the board there. I'm just not sure from a positional value standpoint if the Niners would go off-ball linebacker at number 27. It is a room where going into the offseason, I thought they needed to address. And outside of Fred, you don't have a lot of proven long-term options right now. Dre Greenlaw is on a 1-year contract. If he can stay healthy, which he's been injury-prone throughout his entire career, he's a top 20 linebacker in the sport. But his health is a huge concern. The Niners right now have, I think, 9 linebackers on the 90-man roster. D. Winters is an okay player, but we kind of know what he is at this point. Now, the signing of Dre kind of allows him to go back to his normal spot when the Niners are in that 4-3 base defense. And so maybe that leads to him being more comfortable and playing better. Plus, he's alongside Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw that can help to elevate his game. I think a lot of this comes down to what do the Niners think of Nick Martin, right? They took him in the 3rd round. He cannot see the field. In the preseason, he was wreaking havoc. Now, he missed a lot of plays, and he was out of position on some plays, but he made some incredible plays, whether it be shooting the gap against the run, whether it be blitzing the quarterback, whether it be showing east-west, sideline-to-sideline speed. There was a play against the Raiders in which he shot down the seam, and he had really good coverage. But I don't think the Niners trusted him in year 1, coming off a year at Oklahoma State in 2024 where he didn't play a lot because his inexperience showed. And sometimes he can be an overly aggressive player who takes himself out of the play, and those blown assignments can lead to a lot of explosive plays. But he also has some injury concerns. Like, he never was able to clear concussion protocol. So what's the status of that? It was unfortunate because he was starting to play a little bit more, and you certainly see the ability there. But I think the Niners' decision on whether or not to go CJ Allen or not comes down to what they think of Nick Martin and the other linebackers in that room. D. Winters, by the way, going into the final year of his contract. So outside of Fred, again, you don't have a lot of proven linebackers for the future at that spot. And what better guy to learn from than Fred if you do go that direction, taking a linebacker at any point in this draft. Jacob Rodriguez in the 2nd round, I think, would be better as far as value and potential upside there as compared to CJ Allen, but I do like Allen as a player.
Tony Farmer said a full list of players the Niners have traded up for under this regime. I mean, look at this list. Your hit rate on guys that you trade up for should be about 90%. I mean, you should hit on like basically 8 or 9 of every 10 guys that you trade up for. Joe Williams, bust. C.J. Beathard, backup quarterback. Reuben Foster, bust. Dante Pettis, bust. Tarvarius Moore, bust. Julian Taylor, bust. Greenlaw, you got to hit there. Ayuk, you got to hit there. Charlie Warner, at least he's an NFL player, has a 2nd contract. Trey Sermon's a bust. Trey Lance is a bust. Jair Brown, I'm not really sure yet. Dom Pooney's a player. Garendo, probably a bust. We'll see, I guess. Marquise Siegel may be a player. But, I mean, you got a couple of maybes there, but you only really what of all those guys, who's like a for sure player there?
Well, Ayuk became an All-Pro. Greenlaw has played at an All-Pro level.
Pooney, maybe?
Pooney, but I thought he wasn't great in year 2. I know to start the year he was dealing with that knee injury, and he got a little bit better as the season progressed. But like when he had to go up against the Seattle defensive line, for instance, I don't think that he played all that well, but the jury is still out on him. But the point here, shout out to Tony, friend of the show. They've missed on a lot of trade-up options.
Which makes you wonder where is that coming from? Is that Kyle Shanahan saying, we got to get this guy?
I think
maybe,
so.
And maybe he needs some impulse control, or they need to filter him, or maybe they just need to ignore him. Kyle, hey, I want to trade him for this guy. All right, Kyle. We're not doing it.
Jim Tomsula Ghost, that X account, said something I thought really fascinating a couple of weeks ago, that when coaches have personnel say, they don't look at it with a long lens. They're looking for scheme fits and immediate impacts right away. And so for Kyle Shanahan, I think that's why we've seen some of these reaches, because he's like, oh, we can plug and play that player and he can play for us right off the jump. Whereas they don't take players who might take longer to develop, but have brighter futures as their careers progress. And I think that is a little bit of a byproduct of that.
There was an argument in the Eagles war room a few years ago, and I can't remember who the other player was. Maybe you can remember. It was Tom Donahoe and Howie Roseman. Donahoe
Williams pick.
Yeah, it was the Milton Williams pick, but they chose Milton Williams. But do you remember who Donahoe wanted?
I'm not sure.
It was another defensive tackle, basically, who wasn't as twitched up as Milton Williams. Milton Williams was a twitchy, athlete who played at Louisiana Tech, who Howie saw upside potential in. And Donahoe wanted a little bit more of a productive player, but not nearly as twitched up a player. And Howie, of course, has the job and the final say. And so he overruled Donahoe, and they had some words on camera in the Eagles war room. But it just kind of goes to show that, you know what? Those are two personnel guys that had a difference of opinion. But, it's not necessarily always a slam dunk. So there's a lot of disagreements in the room. All right, let's go.
To your point, Larry, Aleem McNeil, Milton Williams, and then 2 picks later, Osa Digizua. 3 excellent defensive tackles there that went 3 out of 4 picks.
Wow.
So Donahue could have wanted an Aleem McNeil. He could have wanted an Osa Digizua, for instance.
I forget who it was. I remember it was kind of a bigger bodied more of a big bodied, but not as much of an athlete. And Milton Williams emerged as he wasn't very good right away, but it took him some time. But when he did finally learn, he obviously earned a second contract. He's now in New England. He's making good money. He's a difference maker. Let's hit some of the Niner needs in the draft, and I'll throw you the need, and you throw me a draft player that you think makes sense. Edge. Who's an edge player in this draft that you think makes sense for the Niners?
Man, this player could go in the first round. This player could go in the second round. But Malachi Lawrence out of Central Florida is a player who I really, really like. He's got twitch. He's got size. He's got good bend. He's good against the run, and he's a disruptive pass rusher. He's a player that is definitely different from a Mykel Williams prototype. And the Niners sometimes have liked the bigger defensive ends. He's a little bit smaller. But I think that the Niners have to change their philosophy a little bit by getting smaller, twitchier, speedier defensive ends who really have that big bend as compared to a Mykel Williams type where he's a good edge setter. You already have that guy, Mykel Williams. So Raheem Morris last year, who did he draft in the first round? Jalen Walker and then James Pierce. They are leaner pass rushers. Malachi Lawrence isn't that lean as James Pierce, but he's kind of in that build. So that's a player who I like.
That's a good one. I kind of like Danny Dennis Sutton from Penn State.
Love him out of Penn State.
He's rushed out of a 2-point stance, so he's going to have to be coached up on a 3-point stance in the wide 9. But this kid is long and really talented. I mean, 6'6", and he carries his weight on his frame really well. I mean, I would say he weighs about 270, but he moves like a smaller man. Danny Dennis Sutton, I think he's probably going to be a second-round pick. Maybe he's the third-round pick, but he's right there. Malachi Lawrence, he's right in that same neighborhood. But
if he falls to the third, he's one of the biggest steals of the draft. The last 2 years, he's been so disruptive. He's followed the likes of Micah Parsons and Abdul Carter. Parsons and Carter had experience dropping back in coverage. Smith Sutton had a little bit of that as well. He is an excellent athlete and a game wrecker. And honestly, like, I would think about taking him in the first. I think he's going to be that good.
He's a really, the Penn State athletes. I mean, like give you an example. I also think Zane Durant is like when the Niners pick in the second round, he's projected to go in the third or fourth round. But at 290 pounds, Zane Durant ran
smaller,
4.75
freak.
And to me, I would take him in the second round. And I love Osa Odigizua, but I'd want this guy too. And why not? You can never have enough interior rushers. 290-pound guys who can rush the passer can be used in a lot of different spots on your defensive line.
Aaron Donald.
Yeah, exactly. Zane Durant. If the Niners reached for those two Penn State guys out of the chute in round 1 and round 2, I wouldn't blink. Give me a wide receiver. There's a lot of talk about wide receiver. And everybody's got their favorites. Do you have a favorite wide receiver that they can get? You mentioned Branch already, but.
Yeah, Branch is more of a round 3, round 4 guy because he's smaller and more of a gadget guy.
Right.
In the first round, I do like Casey Concepcion a lot. He's got a diverse route tree. He can create separation. His success rate running a bunch of different routes was impressive. He's definitely had some drop issues, but he's a really dynamic athlete who I like a lot. A player who I've heard you mention from time to time, who I think a lot of people are sleeping on, and Greg Cosell was saying if he went to a bigger school, he'd think that he could go in round 1, Ted Hurst, the wide receiver out of Georgia State. He's 6'4", moves really well. If the Niners got a wide receiver in, let's say, the third round, who I think has number 1 ability over time, I would say Jacoby Lane out of USC. He's 6'4". The gauntlet drill was so smooth. He's long. I think that he can win against press man. I think he's a dynamic playmaker. He's got that prototypical number 1 wide receiver size. So those are some wideouts really ranging from rounds 1 through 4 who come to my mind immediately.
Yeah, Hurst I really, really like, but Jacoby Lane he makes some of those catches look so easy.
Yeah, and Mekhi Lemon kind of stole the headlines at wide receiver for USC, but like you watch what Lane did, wow, ability. Yeah.
Both those guys are really special in their own right. Very special players. All right, how about offensive line? Do you have an offensive lineman that you're just like, you know what, get that guy?
Yeah, again, if you're at 27 and Max Ianachur is available, started playing football in 2021. But he was great at the Senior Bowl, great in the Combine. He has more than 30 starts throughout his college career. He is an excellent athlete who has the Trent Williams impress you type of athleticism where if he gets out in space on a pull block, you're like, wow, he could bulldoze over linebackers, DBs, and safeties and really climb to that second and third level. I think that he has tremendous upside. Blake Miller kind of reminds me of Mike McGlinchey a little bit. He's a more slender tackle, and I think he's a right tackle primarily. So what would you do with Colton McKivitz? But Blake Miller is a good athlete for his size. He's like 317 pounds, whereas Ianachur is like 330 pounds. He had 52 starts at Clemson. So he could be a plug-and-play player right from the get-go. Monroe Freeling if he falls, but I don't think he does. Caden Proctor I like a lot. And the Niners could train him to play tackle eventually, but plug him in at guard if they want to put him at left guard, because I think Brett Toth is more of a backup guard who the Niners signed earlier in free agency. He can also play a little bit of center. And then I know this player is big and he might not fit the scheme, but I'm just fascinated by the athleticism, and he's probably a third round guy, Markel Bell out of Miami. He's like 6'9", 370 pounds, and ran just over a 5-second 40-yard dash. In the outside zone, I'm not sure that he would fit, but I'm fascinated to see how he fares at the next level. Pat Coogan, a late round center out of Indiana, is somebody who I really like. And then who's the Iowa offensive tackle who's probably more of a second round guy?
Jennings Dunker.
I would like him in the second round for the Niners if they don't go offensive line first round. Mayoko said they don't think the Niners, or he doesn't think the Niners go offensive line the first 4 rounds.
I don't either.
Oh,
I think
it's insane, but not surprising.
No, not surprising. I'll tell you the guy that I love though. I love the Oklahoma guard / center Fabechi Weewu.
Okay.
It's spelled Nwewu, but I think it's pronounced Weewu. 6'4", 320, 34-inch arms.
Big boy.
Played center at the East-West game. Looked great at center. I think he could take over for Brendel. Strong in the run game, but he did not allow a sack or a pressure. Only allowed or sack or a hit all year. Only allowed 2 pressures all year. He's considered PFF's highest rated pass blocking interior player. Fabechi Weewu, he probably will be there in the 4th round.
I'll add this. Vega Ioane,
Oklahoma.
if he's there at 27, run the pick to the podium.
Yeah, I agree.
He's a 10-year starter at guard, I think.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about the Penn State kid.
Penn State, Vega Ioane.
Yeah, Venga Ioane.
Yeah.
I mean, 6'4", 320, and just a culture changing.
Yeah.
This guy is Canton. I think he's a Canton-bound player. I totally agree with you.
Baldy thinks he's the best offensive lineman in the draft.
Baldy knows his shit. I mean, he absolutely does. And not only that, this guy is such a difference maker that, I mean, this might be the only player that I would trade up for. And if he's there, I would definitely put him at left guard. I mean, I would put him at plug and play. How about tight end? Is there a tight end that you like in this draft?
Sam Roush out of Stanford. Good blocker, good athlete. He's like 6'6", 6'7".
260.
He could be there round 3, round 4, maybe. Eli Stowers is probably more of a second round guy. Really good athlete out of Vanderbilt. Oscar Delp out of Georgia. Daquan Wright, the Ole Miss tight end, I think led all tight ends in college football in yards after the catch last year, or yards after contact. I think is a physical type of tight end who's really big and burly. I think that he's going to be a good player at the next level. This tight end class is pretty deep.
Yeah, and it's a beauty in the eye of the beholder. There's a number of guys that I really like. I like the Penn State kid again. I like Khalil Dinkins as a late round guy, and there's a couple different tight ends that I think have a lot of talent in this draft. R.J. Maryland from SMU. Really like him. Bauer Sharp from LSU. I think, he's definitely an NFL player for sure. Oscar Delp, even though he doesn't have great production, I think he's really interesting. Nate Bokircher from A&M is a really good blocker. Really like him. How about corner? Now, where, this is the one factor that we don't know going into this draft for the Niners is
Renardo Green.
Renardo Green and also Raheem Morris. Like, Raheem Morris, we know, is going to run the secondary. He has a good eye for talent. He picked up Xavier Watson, Billy Bowman at the safety spot last year. The Niners could be looking at really the sweetest of sweet spots for corners when they pick at 27. Chris Johnson, Colton Hood, Brandon Cisse, Keontae Scott. We should talk about him. Davison Igbenuson. I mean, Dalen Everett. All these guys are going to be on the board for them. And how do you pass on Keontae Scott? Keontae Scott, to me, looks like Brian Branch. He ran 4.25, and then he had ridiculous strength, and his production's off the charts. He had a pick 6 in the Natty. Keontae Scott can play the nickel. He can play the boundary. He can play the slot. He can play free safety. I mean, I think he's Brian Branch. I think Keontae Scott is a star. And I would have a hard time passing him at 27. I know he's projected to go in the second round, but you saw that Miami workout the other day. I mean, and this kid's production is as good as any DB in the country.
Yeah, and I think he's climbing up draft boards after that. Avion Terrell is a player who I really like out of Clemson. His brother is A.J. Terrell, really good corner for Atlanta. He's forced 8 fumbles in the last 2 years, so he is a disruptive playmaker who can play inside, outside. Let's see. D'Angelo Pons, I love him out of Indiana, but the Niners already have a slot corner who I think Upton Stout is only going to continue to get better. And he's in the same build as D'Angelo Pons. Pons is 5'9", and Upton Stout is around that height as well. Brennan Siss out of South Carolina. Davison Igbenasson out of Ohio State is another player, 6'2", 195. So he has really good size. Keith Abney, 6 foot, 190 out of Arizona State. Traden Stukes is a player who a lot of people are really starting to fall in love with in the pre-draft. He's made some incredible plays on the ball with some highlight reel-worthy interceptions during his time in college at Arizona. He's 6'2", 200 pounds. Malik Muhammad out of Texas. So, yeah, all those players I think would be good ones. But, you know, it does come down to what do they think of Renardo Green, right? I think that Diamador Lenore is one of the more underrated corners in football. You know, I mentioned his numbers against Jackson Smith and Jigba over the last 3 years. He's been able to fare well against him. He's been able to shut down some of the top wide receivers in football. And at his price tag, keep him at outside corner because he's a great value player there. You have Upton Stout in the slot. What is and who is Renardo Green? If you don't like him, it would be a shame because they took him in the second round 2 years ago, but then corner becomes a pretty big need for the Niners.
No question. And there could be some good ones there. Pons is another really, really safe pick. Let's hit a couple last things and we'll bolt for the door. There's talk this week about Najee Harris coming to the Niners. I sent a note to his agent because his agent's a buddy of mine, the great Doug Hendrickson. I said, hey, are the Niners showing interest in Najee? And he said, not yet. It doesn't seem like he would be a fit for the 49ers because he's a running back and he's a slow running back and they like speed in their running backs. But if he was willing to kind of, transition to being a fullback or some kind of a special teams, jack of all trades, tight end, fullback, H-back, whatever, I could see it, but not at big dollars. What are you hearing on Najee Harris? Do you think he's a fit?
I don't think he's a fit for the Niners. I think it's the Jordan James era to be RB2 to take the place of Brian Robinson, who signed with Atlanta this week. Christian McCaffrey is going to be 30 this upcoming season. He touched the rock more than 400 times last year. So I think Jordan James will get a decent amount of carries, and I think he has a lot of potential. Really good contact balance, hands out punishment. Did not fumble once while at Oregon. He can pass protect. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. So I think the Niners roll with McCaffrey, Jordan James, probably Isaac Rendo's last opportunity to prove that he can actually stay healthy. He was hurt at Wisconsin, hurt at Louisville, been hurt with the Niners, but he's 225 pounds and he runs in the 4.3s. Can he stay healthy? Because he's a pretty dynamic player there. That's not a bad 1-2-3 punch. Patrick Taylor was playing pretty well throughout training camp and in the preseason before he got hurt last year. That's your RB4, although he's a better special teamer. Kyle Shanahan probably won't be able to help himself with drafting a running back at some point in this draft. And if he does, one of the two Penn State backs, Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, they could be worth a look there for the Niners. But yeah, Najee Harris, I don't think he's a fit for the Niners. He's been a non-efficient back. Like he's had several 1,000-yard seasons, but his yards per carry has been like at 4 or below 4. Is big in theory, but sometimes doesn't play up to that type of physicality. And we're hearing here at Chat Sports that the Raiders are very interested in him and he could sign with the Raiders.
Very interesting. Two last thoughts. Are the 49ers, you think, happy with their young safeties? I mean, this is another unknown. We really don't know how Raheem Morris has evaluated what the Niners have back there. They have Jair Brown. They have Malik Mustafa. They have Marquise Siegel. 3 young safeties they've invested picks in. People have suggested Jesse Bates as a trade option. Do the Niners need a veteran safety to add to the mix? And if so, who's on that short list? Either in trades or maybe in free agency.
Yeah, I think they need to address safety. I actually think it's one of the bigger weaknesses on the defensive side of the ball right now. And it's not that I hate Malik Mustafa. I think that Mustafa is a really good player. He hands out hits like it's his job, and he's very physical. He's a downhill player. He's made some really nice plays against the run, and he plays with reckless abandon. I just don't think that he is that center field lockdown coverage type of safety, which is what the Niners need. You can have Mustafa, but then at the other safety spot, I think you do need a player who can help you more on the back end. Jair Brown is not that guy. In the pre-draft, I think he ran like a 4.6. So he's not really fast on that back end. I think he, like Mustafa, is better on the line of scrimmage. So I would love to see the Niners go after a safety who's a ball hawking player. I think they've missed that over the last couple of years. I would call the Atlanta Falcons about a Jesse Bates trade. They just traded for Sidney Brown. I think Brown is more of a depth piece and really good special teamer, but Bates is going into the final year of his deal. He's making around, I think, $20 million per year. So I would look into trading for a player like Jesse Bates. It's a solid safety class too in the NFL draft. And I think Marquise Siegel has some upside. There were some ups and downs during his rookie year. There were ebbs and flows, and that'll happen oftentimes for a rookie, but I think he's also worth another look.
Last one, 49ers, 30 visits with Omar Cooper, KC Concepcion, Denzel Boston. Tony Pauline says they really like Chris Bell from Louisville.
Yeah.
A lot of interesting names at wide receiver for sure. I saw that you put out a thing on Ted Hurst. I agree. I think Ted Hurst would be a great fit. Let's play this one cut here. Here's my buddy Cosell talking about KC Concepcion from A&M. Here's what he has to say about KC.
There's a lot of guys. I'll tell you a guy that I have to mention because I love him, and that's KC Concepcion. See, now to me, when I watched him, the first guy that came to my mind was I thought of Zay Flowers coming out of Boston College, but I really like KC Concepcion a lot. This guy's got juice. These other guys don't really have that kind of juice, but this guy is sudden, twitchy. He's got short area explosiveness. He's got accelerating vertical speed. He can definitely be a factor at all three levels of the defense. And, the other thing that we need to talk about very briefly is some of these smaller receivers, in terms of weight, not necessarily height, they play on the outside now in the NFL. It's not like, oh, God, the guy's 185 pounds. He can't play on the outside. Think of Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison plays on the outside of Minnesota. I think he was 173 when he came, at the combine. I could be wrong on the exact number, but he was. Yeah. Devontae Smith is 160. So, you can't look at a guy that's 187 or 185 and go, well, he can't play on the outside. Concepcion to me is arguably the most dynamic receiver in this draft class in terms of everything he can do from the receiver position and the explosiveness.
I think if you're taking KC Concepcion, you're falling in love with that Seahawk concept of, you know what, you got to have some explosives. Seahawks won the Super Bowl because they limit your explosives and they get explosives. Niners do not have this receiver. Mike Evans will help, but KC Concepcion is a totally different animal than Mike Evans and Christian Kirk. The interesting thing is when I saw my draft guide, which I have over here, compared KC Concepcion, his player comp, Christian Kirk. I thought that was interesting, and they're very similar. They're, smaller guys who ran well, but not super great, but in the 4.4s, both played at A&M. What do you make of the Niners bringing in all these receivers? They have right now Mike Evans, Christian Kirk, Ricky Pearsall, Jordan Watkins, Jacob Cowing, Demarcus Robinson. Most teams only carry 5 or 6 receivers. That's 6 right there. They still have 3 or 4 other guys on the roster in addition, and they're talking about drafting a receiver maybe in the first round. They're bringing in receivers that they may take in the first round. When I hear the Niners are bringing in those receivers for 30 visits, I know people are going to roll their eyes. They don't want to hear this. It makes me think that the people that told me in December in Philly that Ricky was going to be traded might be onto something, because I can't see the 49ers just keep stockpiling more. They're going to invest a 4th round pick in Cowing and just piss that away. They're going to 4th round pick in Watkins and 1st round pick in Pearsall. They're going to run another first-round pick and a receiver, and Mike Evans, and Christian Kirk, and Demarcus Robinson. I don't know, man. It seems like Kirk can do the return skills, so he's that guy. There's talk about Debo, but I think Debo winds up going somewhere else. I like a lot of these young receivers, but I don't know, man. When I hear these names of Omar Cooper and Concepcion, first thing that comes to mind is who's trading for Ricky? Because none of those other receivers can be traded, really. I mean, you could trade Watkins, but you're not getting anything for Watkins or Cowing. No. You're not getting anything for DeMarcus. The only receiver they have that's tradable is Ricky. And I had a person very close to the Niners tell me that Renardo Green and Ricky were both likely to be traded this offseason. I started to doubt it as time has gone on, and there's lots of people that are crushing me every time I mention it. But why 30 visits for receivers on a receiving core that's 6 deep? I don't get that. You have needs
a lot of
everywhere.
Different ways to look at this. I think offensive line, defensive line, wide receiver, you can never have enough depth there. I think one thing too, Mike Evans is going to be 33 years old this upcoming season. Christian Kirk is going to be 30 years old this upcoming season. Evans is pretty much on a 1-year deal. Christian Kirk is pretty much on a 1-year deal. Those are very short-term win now types of moves. We know that Kyle Shanahan doesn't love playing wide receivers early if he loses trust in them, because this scheme is very difficult to master and comprehend.
In fairness, though, he did play Debo and Ayuk.
Well, those guys were really good right off the jump, but even BA year 2 was in the doghouse. Debo right away and his entire career has been one of the best yak wide receivers in his generation and arguably all time. If you just judge that by the numbers, and obviously what he's put on tape is very impressive.
I mean, I hear you on the 1-year deals, but you still got to roster these guys. You know what I mean? This year.
Yeah, but
or you're gonna cut, maybe you're cutting. Maybe they're cutting Watkins. Maybe
Jacob
they're going to cut
can't stay on the field. You know, Jacob Cowing can't stay on the field. I like Jordan Watkins. He's got that 4.3 speed and ball tracking ability. We saw it when he tracked that deep ball from Mac Jones. Like, that is a skill set that you can't teach, and it comes natural to somebody. So let's just break this down, right? Mike Evans is the number 1.
Yep.
Ricky Pearsall's the number 2.
Yep.
Christian Kirk out of the slot, right? And then outside of that, like, you could cut Demarcus Robinson if you want to and save some money, or he could be your wide receiver 4, not a bad thing. And then you let Cowing and Watkins, 2 speed guys, duke it out for wide receiver 5. And then you hold on, or let's say you draft a wide receiver. That's your 6th wide receiver. Obviously he wouldn't be 6 in the pecking order, but what if you went Evans, Pearsall, Concepcion? That is a really good 1, 2, 3 punch at wide receiver. I don't think right now is the time to trade Ricky or Renardo, given Pearsall was a 1st-round pick. Renardo was a 2nd-round pick. I think this is the make or break year for both of those players. And if they're injured, or Pearsall is soft and doesn't come back from his injuries and doesn't show a willingness to do that, I think then they might move off of both those players. But I think it's too early to move off of Renardo and Pearsall, given the ability that they've shown and where they were drafted. I just think it's too early to call it quits on those players.
You know, the intel that I got on those guys, the guy, you know, basically said, hey, you know, Pearsall, you know, couldn't get on the field, and there was some miscommunication late in the year about the Niners thought he was coming for one of those games, and he wasn't. And I don't know if there's bad blood there. There's also Renardo Green talk about how he's just kind of a loner, maybe doesn't fit in personality wise. I don't know. We'll see. They've kept both these guys right now. We'll see into and out of the draft what happens. Last thought before we bolt for the door. And what are you hearing on the Eagle front? You know, I know Howie's plays his cards close to the vest, but, you know, he's also, you know, Lynch and Howie, as I said, both like the Georgia players. I could see Howie picking a couple players out of Athens as well. What are the Eagles' thought process going into the draft?
I think it's offense early, and I think it's offensive line early. I think it's a lock that they take an offensive lineman in the first 2 rounds. It comes down to what happens with A.J. Brown, whether or not they go wide receiver early, but it's a pretty deep wide receiver class where I think they could address that position. I think safety is the other position that they need to address, and tight end. Outside of that, they're in a good spot. Edge rusher is another one that Howie really likes to invest in. And then outside of the draft, like what happens with AJ? I've been all over the map. You know,
isn't he going to be traded after June 1st because of the cap
it would
hit?
have to be. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to eat $40+ million in dead money pre-June 1. If you trade him after June 1, that allows you to draft a wide receiver or at least see how the board falls. And if the board doesn't fall your way, maybe you make a trade for like a Brian Thomas or something like that. And then you trade AJ to spread out that dead money. If they were to trade him, regardless of its pre-June 1, post-June 1, they'd save over $100 million in cash. So everybody wants to focus on the dead money, but they would save a lot of money. But if they keep him, if they trade him, like that's a big domino that decides what they do elsewhere on the roster. And if AJ doesn't get traded before the draft and then the Eagles take a wide receiver in round 1, I think that says, okay, they're trading AJ after June 1.
Yeah, that will be something to watch for sure. All right, 3 quick supers and we'll bolt for the door. Jerry Martinez. The best way forward is for the 49ers to trade Trent Williams and draft Ian Acher, then the next best available receiver in the second. You know what? I actually think Jerry is right. I think it's time to move off of Trent Williams. And I think Ian Acher is the guy.
He's played right tackle, though. That's the only issue.
Played right tackle. He's played right tackle. He's going to have to be coached up. I mean, that's the problem. Blake Miller, right tackle. Ian Acher, right tackle. But Ian Acher's got the ability, I think, to move to left tackle. He could have some rough early moments because he didn't play junior college ball. So this guy's really raw.
Started playing football in 2021.
Right. But, I mean, he's 6'6", 330 with awesome feet and amazing long arms. And, I mean, God, if Chris Furster really is an elite offensive line coach, how could you not want Ian Acher? I mean, come on. I understand he downplays premier guys, but come on. Ian Acher looks just absolutely freaking amazing to me. Anthony Catania's in the house from Sharp Corner, Sports Cards and Collectibles. He says, Larry, another great show. Chase, what's up? Hope you are well. Customers who are Niner fans are getting very excited about this season. Go Niners. Oh, good to hear.
Anthony, good to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great guy. We should tell everybody thank you to Sharp Corner, Sports Cards and Collectibles, 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove along the Monterey Peninsula. Call Anthony Catania. He's at 831-521-5264. He's offering free shipping if you're a Krug Show supporter. So thank you to Anthony for that one. And that does it for us. We're gonna bolt for the door. We'll call it right here. Chase, what do you got cooking the rest of your Friday? You gonna play some golf? What kind of weather we got in Dallas on a Friday in March?
I love golf and I really enjoy hitting the links. I just don't have a lot of time to hit the golf course, especially with like a lot of the training and the workouts that I'm doing. So this weekend, pumping out content as we always do because I love talking ball. I launched my own YouTube channel where I can talk about the NFL and college football on a national scale. It's under the Chat Sports umbrella. Launched it a couple weeks ago. We're already at 3,000 subscribers, so check that out. The Chase Down. I'll hang with the girl, get some workouts in, get some vitamin D, hang out outside. I am the officiant of one of my buddies' weddings, so we're going out to dinner on Saturday night to a steakhouse. So I've got that.
You're actually you're marrying them?
I am.
Wow.
Yep. So
when's it? That's this weekend?
It's not this weekend, but we're going out to dinner to kind of celebrate him getting married in a couple of months. So I know a lot of people in the chat were hating on me. They think I'm the worst, but I'm actually a pretty good guy. So
you know what they say? The opposite of love is not hate. It's indifference.
Yes.
And nobody's indifferent about Chase Sr. Chase, good stuff. Thanks to all of you guys. Thanks to our sponsors. Links are in the description for all of them. Thanks to all of you guys. Have a great rest of your Friday. Until next time, peace.
Yeah, never met a man